Thank you. All right, well, I'm Shara Molyneux, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for our Educators for Peace and Justice presentation. Topic is social art, and we will be discovering how to apply it to your teaching practice. And we are fortunate to have social artists with us here tonight who are making a difference in their communities. We will be featuring their artwork. Rizwang is here tonight. If you could give a little wave, Riz. And Amanda Haynes, a little wave from you, perfect. And we also have Kyle Simlers here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, before we get started, I'd like to invite Kira to share a little land acknowledgement with us.
Hi everyone, sorry, I just got to switch over to my page because I was taking notes of who was here already. So before we get started, we just wanted to take a minute to recognize the land that we play, live on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina, Nakota, and Métis Nations, and all people who make their homes in Treaty 7 territory. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our special guests for presenting this evening. I'm super excited.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kira. All right. So moving on, you might be wondering who we are, what Educators for Peace is all about. We are a subcommittee of the Plowshares Calgary Society. We were started in 2020 by some education students who were passionate about peace and justice. And we wanted to connect with like-minded individuals, deepen our knowledge, and share resources. So we created an online platform to do that, and you are welcome to join. Our Facebook page is Educators for Peace and Justice Alberta. All right. We'd like to thank you so much for being here tonight. We're very excited to have Rizwang and Amanda Haynes and Kyle Simmers with us. These artists are very active participants in our vibrant art scene here in Calgary, or Mokinstis as it is known in Blackfoot. You can find them on social media, and I've included their handles here. And I will formally introduce them a little later, just before they present. And I ask you to just hold your questions until they've finished sharing. And also, if you have questions during the meeting, you're welcome to put those in the chat, and one of us will be sure to reply. Anyway, we are so excited to collaborate with you all, and thank you so much for coming tonight. So you might be curious, what is social art? Firstly, it's essentially, is any artistic expression or creative process that aims to create social impact. It can be about the product, the process, or both. Either way, the artist's intention is at the heart of the work. It can disrupt narratives and has powerful social emotional applications. The power of art to affect individual and social transformation is increasingly being recognized, and our understanding of what social art is constantly evolving. Here we have an example of Shamsia Hassani's art. She's an Afghan street artist, and her intention is to make her work visible to all. She doesn't want you to have to go into a gallery to see her work. So she does a lot of her work on bombed and broken down architecture in Kabul as a way to process her grief over the war and to make something beautiful out of the destruction. Why does social art matter? Well, no matter how it's defined, it definitely has a lot of educational potential and can be a powerful learning tool. According to the Association of Social Artists, fostering creativity can help citizens properly navigate the 21st century's most pressing issues. Some problems or issues defy logic and are best expressed or best addressed in the subtle, nuanced ways that only art can offer. art is a language that precedes words. So we might be wondering how you can apply social art to your teaching. Well, social scientist Dr. Julia Bence proposes a framework for integrating art in educational settings. Her examples all relate to climate change, but they could be adapted to other issues. Climate change is often taught through a scientific lens by explaining greenhouse gases and the associated effects, but offers little opportunity for solution-based discourse. Issues are complex and many-sided, so they should be taught by merging and blending subjects. And in education, there's currently a push towards or beyond STEM learning towards STEAM learning, where the A indicates the inclusion of the arts, which it's sort of goes beyond what the scientific fields do with their more analytical and evidence-based processes. And art really helps students to overcome the perceived psychological difference or distance and develop critical thinking skills. Dr. Bence proposes, excuse me, Dr. Bence proposes that we use art as a supporting actor to the learning, but not the primary vehicle when we're teaching in art. Teaching in art can be used to introduce a topic, create interest, and foster student engagement. And the issue being introduced through this picture demonstrates how art can provoke deeper thinking. She also says teaching with art uses creative processes to facilitate dialogue and express learning. This method of teaching is paradigm shifting and goes beyond that traditional sender-receiver model. Teaching with art invites all participants to tap into their creativity, contribute their own perspectives, and orient towards a common goal, which helps create community. Community building is seen as a prerequisite to social transformation. All right. And here we have teaching through art. Teaching through art can offer deeper, more impactful learning for long-lasting change, but it's challenging because it can be time-consuming, and participants, including the teacher, must surrender to an outcome. It's co-creational and open-ended, and results can't be guaranteed. So not all school settings or teachers are prepared to do this type of learning. This approach might include things like field trips, reflective writing, skits, all before the students start expressing their learning through art. All right, well, that's enough for me. You're probably eager to see what our guest artists here have to show us and share with us. Our first guest is Rizwang. Rizwang is a visual communicator based in Treaty 7 territory. They are currently a full-time senior designer and full-time cat parent. They identify as non-binary, genderqueer and queer, and ethnically Chinese. Riz is an active member and volunteer in the community and regularly seeks opportunities to donate their time to benefit the community. Their public art includes projects such as painting cute veggies above the Calgary Community Bridge and a mural inside the new Pay What You Can thrift store, Good Neighbor YYC, as well as a new mural entitled Telling Our Stories for the Bonus' Awesome Mural Jam. So without further ado, I will pass things off to you, Riz.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much for that educational intro to social art. That's really appreciated. Yeah, so hi, as mentioned, I'm Riz. I use they, them pronouns. I am a non-binary Chinese person, and I have bleached yellow-orange hair with shaved sides and a nose piercing. and I'm currently wearing a gray sweater. And as Shara mentioned, I am a designer and I'm an illustrator, and I currently live in Calgary. And what I'm showing today are those aforementioned murals that I've done recently around the city. So just as a, just like an intro, like murals were something that I had never really thought about doing. A lot of my work has actually been like very small scale. I like to draw in very, very tiny sketchbooks and, pen and paper, things like that. And so with the community fridge, it was my first mural that, that I did. And it was actually like a kind of an eye opener for myself as well, and a very educational piece personally. I got connected with one of the people who are working to set up the community fridge. So Megan, who is also like a local artist, a printmaker and a muralist, met her through a friend. And, within a span of a couple of weeks, I had drawn up and designed these cute little like fruit and veggie characters from Megan's idea. And we'd started painting. And Megan was really, a person who guided me through the whole process, and also helped paint a lot of the vegetables and fruits as well, especially some of the higher up ones, as I'm actually quite afraid of heights. So there we were, kind of like climbing up on that frame for the community fridge, and painting in the dark. So that was a whole new kind of learning experience for myself as well. And I honestly, I really loved it. Loved seeing that come to life and become something that was a lot bigger than my initial tiny sketches. And so the goal was to design characters that were welcoming. We put kind of thought into it, just having something that was clear and culturally neutral, didn't need a language to read it. It conveyed a sense of welcoming and friendliness, and it portrays what it is, which is like the fridge's contents. We want fresh fruits and veggies for our community, so it was art for a purpose. And I felt like it really helped people find the fridge and recognize it in the neighborhood and what it's for. And so honestly, it was like, a huge shout out to the folks who continue to run and volunteer at the fridge. It's a much needed resource, providing free food for anyone, and tackling food insecurity in Calgary, especially during this ongoing pandemic. And it was one of my first exposures to a mutual aid initiative that was running in the city, and really showed me that we can work together to fight the systemic inequality, right, and the erosion of social services within capitalism. So actually, if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And so fast forward about a year later, and the same folks were starting a new initiative called Good Neighbor YYC. So I think it was Alice, Megan, and a whole bunch of many volunteers, many people were involved in this. And I had actually reached out to them, and seeing what they were posting on social media, and again, really, really quick work, from some branding that was done by another designer. I took the colors, ran with them, and we were painting, within a couple of days of me kind of chatting with Megan. And so it was very similar concepts, bringing in that welcoming wall with fun characters that were friendly and warm and clear and culturally neutral. And again, it was very inspiring to see an extension of that model that was started from the community fridge. And this initiative was creating an inclusive, barrier-free store that's run entirely by volunteers. And so inspiring to see all that, inspiring to see everything come together within the span of 6 weeks. Like I was there and it was empty, and then it was filled and set up and everything was painted. And just like seeing all the volunteers' hard work and the donations from the community as well, it started to make me feel like I had a sense of being able to contribute, in my small way of just being able to paint a mural that had a lot of impact in the community. And then the next slide, please. Thank you. And so this is my most recent mural. So this was done at the Bonus' Awesome Mural Jam. And it is titled Telling Our Stories. It was very much inspired by the idea of telling stories of, BIPOC and racialized and majority world queer folks, and really was a little bit of an exploration of my own queer identity and Chinese heritage as well. The Janet Mock quote that is painted there is actually a truncation. So I'm actually going to read the full quote out because I do believe it's very impactful. I believe that telling our stories, first to ourselves and then to one another and the world, is a revolutionary act. It is an act that can be met with hostility, exclusion, and violence. It can also lead to love, understanding, transcendence, and community. And so to me, it was the idea of community that was starting to be built through making our stories heard and empowering each other. Like that was something that was really important. And just to speak a little bit of the imagery as well, it's inspired by an East Asian myth. So it's the myth of like a carp being strong enough to swim upstream and leap up over a waterfall and over what's called a dragon's gate. At the top of a mountain would be transformed into a dragon. And that part of that story also really spoke to me. It's that transformative aspect, that idea of resilience and overcoming our struggles. And again, like I mentioned, this actually was, you know, a bit of more of an self-explorative and experimental piece. And I think that was what was kind of interesting about it. And also my first time using spray paint. I actually had a lot of mentorship and guidance from Amanda, who is also on this call. So shout out to Amanda. And yeah, and bringing in all the different colors and stuff like that through the piece. And so finally, I just want to say, like, you know, art for social impact really did transform my way of how I approach my own art and what I want to do with it. I was in a bit of a, you know, situation and a process of learning things about the world and my own place in it, and, you know, my own intersectionalities and how to navigate and interact with each other and others, sorry, in a social justice or communal space. And so it was something that I hadn't, you know, honestly given a lot of thought to previously, because we're not necessarily taught that approach in school or in society. And especially I saw that in my own design work, you know, in my day job, where we're taught what value means is money, or, you know, how many people buy your product. Like that was what was valuable. So it was frustrating to me in my day job as a designer that I was, you know, designing stuff to further the cause of capitalism. And a lot of times, honestly, felt like my own personal art was worthless or didn't matter very much because it was just something I did. So it was definitely a bit of a connecting moment when I started to work on the community fridge mural, like that the art was something that I liked to do, but also hearing from other people appreciate it, and that, you know, that saying that it did make the space friendlier, and then also myself being there and seeing the impact of a grassroots initiative of the fridge in the community, like that was really inspiring. And so doing work like this has been really pivotal to changes to how I approach my work and design, and part of a change to how I see the world, and a challenge to the privilege that I hold. And that's it for me. I think the next slide is just the tags for the Calgary Community Fridge and Good Neighbor. They're always looking for volunteers and donations. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring, and it was just so colorful and interesting, and I really enjoyed your talk. I wonder if anyone would like to ask Riz any questions at this point. There will also be time at the end if you'd like to ask questions then. But if you do have a question, feel free to pop in. All right, well, I guess we shall move on, and then we'll hold that space for later. Our next person is Amanda. Amanda and I know each other a little bit through a project that we did, well, sort of did together. I sort of helped launch it, and then I stepped aside and let her do her creative work. I will just read out her little intro here. So Amanda Haynes is a software engineer and creative director who is passionate about projects that exist at the intersection of art and technology. She is on a mission to create collaborative, accessible, interactive, and immersive experiences, leveraging various mediums, both tangible and intangible. In addition to her corporate role as a programmer, she is the rate-busting creative driver at the heart of many live art collaborations, while also volunteering her website building skills to various causes. She always has a project on the go, is what I know about Amanda. And I'll let you take it away, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and thank you for putting this all together. It's been really fun so far. So as mentioned, I'm Amanda. I'm the, I guess, founder and owner of Mixed Manifest, which is a little company that just kind of sprung out of nowhere. So I don't necessarily consider myself an artist, really. I think I'm more of a facilitator. So I kind of got into the whole like street art scene because I'm obsessed with trains and graffiti art on freight trains. And as a kid, I lived by the train tracks and I used to watch them and just fall in love with all the creative expression. And I kind of like the little bit of a illegal aspect of it too, I think, to be perfectly honest. And so I just, one day I was in Kensington and there was this graffiti jam happening in behind, I think it was the old Oak Tree Tavern. And there was all these folks painting and it was just the coolest like creative expression. And they just were in and out in a couple days. And I thought, I want to do that. That's so cool. But I wasn't really an artist yet. So I was like, maybe I'll try to figure out how to coordinate them because I'm pretty good at like bringing folks together. And so I guess long story short, after a few years now, we've done a couple pretty massive art installations across the city, both indoors and outdoors. So 3 major ones this year that we did, and I've got some slides coming up with videos so we can take a look at kind of like a time lapse of some stuff, and then I'll chat a little bit about each one. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the first one. And as Shara mentioned, she helped out with some funding for this first mural that we can see on the frame. And basically it started out as one mural, and then I didn't think that was enough. So I kind of went all down the alleys and all down the streets in Bowness to try to find more businesses that wanted to get involved. And I ended up getting a couple grants from the city and a couple businesses on board with funding. And we ended up in 72 hours putting up, I think, 8 individual murals in Bowness. And we threw a little party on the street. We had like DJs and musicians and food trucks and all kinds of fun stuff. So we'll play the video and I'll show you what we created together. Doesn't sound like the music's coming through, so I'll just talk through them a little bit. So
Okay.
That's okay. So the first one was the Bowness mural, and that's the one that Shara mentioned helped to collaborate with, and that's on the corner of, like, it used to be the One Stop, or no, I don't know, it's some gas station or service station. And then this one here, as well as the train one that's coming up, which is my favorite, is in behind Leopold's Tavern in Bowness, so just a couple blocks down. And this one's in the alleyway as well. It's kind of like tucked in behind the walkway between Leopold's Tavern and the library. And so we kind of snuck these graffiti pieces in after the fact. They weren't necessarily planned, but once we started going with the murals, the property owners were like, well, what about that wall? What about that wall? And I'm like, I got somebody, let's get them in there. But this was one of my favorites for sure. So it's kind of in the corner and it got this really interesting perspective because it makes it look like it's like going perfectly straight, but it's not, it's in the corner, which is really cool. And so the girl who painted this one, she reached out to a number of artists who paint their pieces on trains and asked if she could do a little bit of a tribute to them in her mural. So she actually painted the train as well as all of the little pieces on it for each person. And I'll be quite honest, like some of the pieces she painted are better than the original artist as far as like how clean they are, especially on such a small scale. They're really cool.
Oh, sorry, I think I may have stopped the video early.
That's okay.
Apologize.
No worries.
Was the music coming through?
I didn't hear it, but that's okay. It was just
okay.
Background music. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to talk over it, so it's kind of okay that didn't.
Okay.
And there was some slides or some more photographs of Riz's lovely mural that they did. And so that one's located in behind the library in Bowness. So we were actually in Bowness last year as well, and we did a big graffiti jam. And so now there's basically like 3 whole blocks that you can just walk down the alley and up around through the streets. And there's just like murals everywhere. There's murals on the sidewalk, there's murals on the walls, there's murals hidden, tucked away in little corners. It's really cool. I think it's in between 63rd and 65th on Boness Road. Definitely worth checking out. And so when you see this one, it's kind of the start of it on the eastmost end, and you can go in behind the alleyway and check out some cool stuff, and then just keep wandering up a couple blocks. And then the other tail end of it is where Riz painted their mural, and that's, like I said, right in behind the library. So definitely go check that out next time you're in Boness.
Awesome. Shall I move on to the next slide?
Please.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No worries. Okay, so this one was really cool. So we were actually in this space last year as well. It was one of the first, I guess, like graffiti jams that I threw. And last year, we kind of took over a space in the Calgary Central Sportsplex, and we threw a digital festival, because with COVID, we weren't allowed to do our regular in-person music festivals. And being that I'm a web developer, I'm like, there's opportunity here. Let's just set up some cameras and get a smaller group of people and basically do a bunch of art and live stream it. And so I don't have any video of that one, but this year we were invited to come back and do an even bigger section. And I absolutely love the way it turned out. So let's definitely watch this one. So for this one, I think there ended up being about 40 different artists that came to participate. And it's pretty open-ended. Like, I try to really offer opportunity to everybody, like folks that may have never painted a mural before, or they've painted a million murals and they're really, really good at it. It's kind of like, it doesn't really matter. Just like, we'll find you a space and come participate. And it's actually really cool because it's created such an interesting, like, little community of people. And like, these are huge events, because 40 people coordinating on scaffolding on these massive, like 150-foot walls, it's a lot of effort. I certainly couldn't do it all by myself, but I'm really impressed with how quickly people are to just like kind of hop on and get involved. So the first ones that I did were really small, and then they just keep getting bigger and bigger because more people want to get involved, and they've got, oh, I've got scaffolding, I'll bring that. Or, oh, I play music, can we set up a stage? Or I've got this like pop-up market thing that I like to do. And it's always like super open-ended, just whatever you want to come and do to contribute. Obviously a little bit tricky with COVID, but we've lucked out really well for all of the events that we've done, that we've either been able to keep ourselves within the restrictions, or at that time there were no restrictions, which is even better. But this one was wild. I tried to do the calculations on square footage of how much wall space we actually painted, and I think it's like well over 10,000 square feet of wall space. And we were in and out, like I said, in roughly 72 hours, with maybe a few hours here and there for packing scaffolding in and out of it. But it's really cool because prior to us going in there, it was, I guess, what you can imagine, like a really bland looking gym. The walls were white or half white, kind of scratchy painted with whatever construction type situation. And there's a video at the end where they do like a 360. I stole it from someone's Instagram, but it's wild because you can see how like all encompassing it is. It's kind of like every direction you look, there's something going on, and there's, here it is, like so many different styles, which is really fun to get everybody involved. And just like, this one was interesting because it was the first one that I coordinated people a little bit less. Like, I basically put people into little groups and I just said, pick a theme, this is your wall, and do your thing. And they really hopped on, and like, it was cool because I was in all the group chats, and the one that did the like Egyptian space kind of theme, like they got really into it, and they were like sharing all these pictures, and they're like, what are we gonna do for the background? And oh, I'm gonna do this like camel character or whatever. It was really fun. And I kind of just like give them the space and let them go do their thing. And then the last one is one that we just did last weekend, I guess. No, the weekend before. And it's in behind the National Golf Academy Golf Dome. So I don't know if y'all know about that big dome. Last year it collapsed because of snow, I think. And so they ended up getting a brand new dome. And within a couple days of getting the new dome, some people went in and tagged it illegally. And quite honestly, it looked pretty bad. Like, they obviously did it in the middle of the night, and it was illegal, unwanted graffiti. So the owners, I don't know how they got connected with me, but they reached out and said, can you do a bunch of graffiti but make it look good. And so we did like a golf theme for these people, and same thing, in and out in like 72 hours, and we just covered the whole alley side wall of this dome in golf graffiti. So we took a picture of like a cartoon picture that was kind of an aerial shot of a golf course, and then spread it far and wide in the group chat and basically just said, you have to do purple fill for your primary color in your piece, and then just do a little bit of blue or green around depending on where you sit on the wall, if you're in the sky or on the ground. And like lots of folks just came and did their individual piece, but then there was a few that really like chipped in and took control of the background and just like took over and started doing all these really cool characters and like kind of tying it all in together. So it's definitely one of the more like cohesive ones that we've put on, I think. So definitely go check that one out if you're in the area and behind Chinook there. It's super fun. That's all for me.
All right. Thank you so much, Amanda. That was really awesome. I'm so sorry that the music didn't work out. It was working on my end. I was trying to sort of work it out, but then was messing other things up. So
it's almost better that way because then you can hear me chirping.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much. That was awesome. Next up, does anybody have any questions for Amanda that they want to ask her right now? Otherwise, there will be some time at the end if you wanted to discuss with her.
I actually had one question.
Yeah, for sure.
That train piece in Boness, who's the artist that did that?
Yeah, her name's Osha. Osha DeWolf. She goes by oddwolf.art on Instagram. She's from Vancouver, I believe. She's not a Calgary resident, so she happened to be traveling to Alberta to visit her partner's mother in the hospital in Red Deer, I believe, and just so happened that the times worked out. And I was planning on doing a call out to artists for that project because that was a curated mural, and I had worked with the property owners to kind of devise a sneaky way around the no graffiti rule. I was like, well, what if we paint a train first? Can we put some graffiti on it? And they're like, oh, that sounds actually pretty cool. And I knew her through my network. And so I didn't even end up having to do a call out. She kind of reached out to me and was like, I would love to do that. That sounds really cool. So it just happened.
Yeah, that's super impressive, the way that the perspective works out on it. I have to go see that in person now. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, try go check it out before like 8 a.m. because once the parking lot fills up with cars, it's not quite as cool. But if you can just get in that whole parking lot and like take a look and like take it all in, it's really impressive.
I love that one as well, Amanda, and I've actually seen it in person. It's so impressive, and sounds like it was pretty serendipitous the way it worked out with the author, or the artist.
Very much so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you. So next we have Kyle Simmers. Thank you so much for being with us, Kyle. I'm just going to do your introduction here. All right, so Kyle Simmers is a non-binary artist and author who works with comic media and street art to connect seemingly disparate worlds. Born and raised in Bashaw, is that how you say it? Bashaw, Alberta, with a population of 830 people. Simmers has experienced firsthand the intersection of queer and rural life. Their public works populate the Treaty 6 and 7 region in the town of Bashaw and Calgary, and the city of Calgary, Mokinstis, and as a participant in the International Mural Festival Bump 2019 and 2020. Simmers works within the arts community despite significant struggles with mental illness. Shortly after the release of Gone Fishin' 2019, Simmers was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1. They feel compelled to share powerful, knowledgeable creations of their experiences and challenges, which so many go through without representation. So thank you again for being here and for sharing your work with us. We so appreciate it. And you just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle. So there's sort of a running theme of public art. And so I'm just starting off in that realm as well. I I wanted to focus in on a few of the things that I've done. I think I've painted 10 murals in Calgary now, and then a few in my hometown of Bashaw. These two in particular I thought were worth highlighting, as they were areas where I was given a lot of artistic license in what I was doing in these spaces. With the image that you're seeing on your left, that's in Inglewood along 9th Ave. And it's a riff off of the iconic photo of a sailor coming back from Victory over Japan Day in New York, in Times Square. And this image actually had like initially started as like a straight gender swapped sort of idea. And as we were painting it, and I was designing it further, I started to push in this more androgyny into this figure in a way that I think has produced probably probably my favorite piece that I've done in the city. It's a piece that like acts as a mirror to people when they look at it in some ways. Because I know queer folks who have looked at this mural and been like, oh, amazing, it's a lesbian couple up there. But yeah, straight folks will look and see the masculine figure and think that it's like a woman taking charge of her man. And I think that's really interesting just in the way that like, you know, everyone coming at that is bringing their own subjective experience to it. And it does very much do what my intention was, which was just to get people to reflect on the way that they're perceiving these bodies based on the gender that they're laying over top of them. And then following that onto the right, this is at Dickens Pub, which is a great underground space that hosts a lot of drag and queer events. And so they wanted to do something that showcased how this was an inviting, welcoming space to the queer community. And it's very easy to throw up a rainbow on a wall and say that it's queer affirming, but I felt like I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into queer history, into some figures, some important figures that I wanted to lay in there, some authors and activists that I thought were important to include in the work, as well as referencing to like punk aesthetics. I feel like there's something very anti-institutional and anti-capitalist sort of embedded within a lot of queer identity and queer philosophy that I felt like was important to bring in there. And then it was a matter of mixing energy and chaos to see how many different terms I could try and throw up there in a sort of lighthearted fashion. So those two were like great ways of sort of like taking up space as queer folks in a city that is traditionally a somewhat hostile environment to us. I think that it's really important for I like to make work that I wish that I had seen when I was growing up. I think that that's probably like the most like socially engaged aspect that runs throughout all of my work, is creating stories that I wish that I had heard, I wish that I had seen. I think that representation is a thing that gets talked about a lot, but it really does hit home when you've not had that. Growing up in a town of 800 people, there was no queer visibility. And, you know, that just sort of formulates the narratives that you allow yourself to believe about who you are. So yeah, these are trying to create opportunity for people to envision life differently. And we can move on from here to one of the works that I did for, this is for Bump 2019. I did this work with my brother, Derek Simmers. Actually, both, all the works that you've seen so far. This one I was like the creative lead on. And this is a work that came out of a really challenging period for me. Just a few months before, I had repeated hospitalizations and had learned my diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So that was, there was a lot of work going on in my head trying to like make sense of, you know, mental illness and what this meant for me and how I was going to manage this. And for me, my experience with hospitalizations was from mania, and I tend to drop into very deep depressions following these manic periods, which is right where I hit this within. And this is work that's called Vanitas, which is a school of Dutch still life painting from the 17th century. So everything in it is sort of like imbued with this canon sort of meaning that was a way of mixing together the sheer diversity of things that I was feeling. And there's a lot of, Vanitas is a lot about the simultaneous presence of life and death in a moment, of joy and sorrow, and like these sort of, the material and the finite versus the spiritual and the infinite. It's sort of a dichotomy that I tried to skew across this diagonal that's cut throughout it. So this one's work that like invites more participation if a person wants. I like to make work that has sort of layers of engagement to it, where, you know, it's on the back of a bookstore. There's books with flowers. It's beautiful. There's like a quick narrative that can sort of come from that. But if a person's interested in digging into what that title means, there's, you know, you can research every element in that work and piece together the more like layered meaning that I was headed for. But I don't like to demand that work of people. I like that to be like an option. Like that's like the bonus section to a work that you can dig into. I think from here, I move on from the mural work that I've done into a project called Pass Me By. Pass Me By is a graphic novel series that I've been working on for the past 5 years. We just released our second book, Pass Me By Electric Vice, but featured here is our first book, Pass Me By Gone Fishing. And this is a story about an elderly gentleman dealing with a dementia diagnosis. And our first book was this sort of slow burn look at Ed's life as he's grappling with this new reality, grappling with a mind and a body that's betraying him, dealing with family relationships or lack thereof, community, and depression and disease. You can keep cycling through here. I think I've got a few different pages laid out. Yeah, so this was like a very like vulnerable take on some things that were popping up in life around me. I find that like the most rich ground that I can plant anything in is my personal experience and the stories that have been shared with me by friends and family. This story was inspired by my maternal grandmother being diagnosed with dementia. At the time that I was working on it, we were sort of seeing stage 1 of dementia, and there was this whole, it was a fairly traumatic thing for an entire family tree. That was sort of being felt out on all the branches. Then this project was a way for me to try and explore those feelings and make some sort of sense and find some light in this situation that seemed terrifying. And it was this experience that I connected through my own experience of depression. This feeling that of a mind that's betraying you, and of, you know, a loss of control and loss of agency, and loneliness and isolation sort of came through in this series. We can probably pop through. I think we might get into book 2 here. Yeah, and so book 1, Gone Fishing, is a heavy read. Our goal is to make you cry and feel things. And with book 2, we still want to make you feel things, but we've jumped back into Ed's memories because we became very interested in, if this character is losing their memories, you know, what is it that's being lost? What's the story there? What's the history? And particularly, we were interested in the stories that were never shared. So Pass Me By Electric Vice jumps into a period of Ed's life where he is taken outside of the context that you met him in book 1, removed from this small town world and going on tour with a glam rock band. Ed begins to explore gender and sexuality, and it becomes this vehicle for personal exploration in this sort of simultaneous coming of age stories that's happening between the two, with this sort of return to childhood happening in the present, and this experience of finding self and, you know, growing beyond the bounds of what a small town might want to define masculine folks as. I think I like have queued up here this one is interesting in the way that it allows us to tap into queer history. We set it in the 1970s because that was a really interesting period where there was a lot of artists who were pushing the boundaries of what gendered exploration could be. We had like David Bowie appearing on the cover of Man Who Sold the World in a dress, and we Mick Jagger played Hyde Park in 1968 wearing a frock, and you know, everything that the New York Dolls were doing, and Freddie Mercury and Elton John, and like there was a really vital period of gendered exploration happening there that there was something electric to tap into through that. If you keep cycling through here, I just wanted to show reference to the sort of research that I do with these projects. This little bit was to bring around those elements of depression as something that's been, it's a lifelong process, and it returns and it leaves, and it keeps informing your experience. But one of the biggest joys about this project was tapping into archives of photography. I was looking at a lot of work from Neil Preston and Nick Rock and Barry Wenzel, these guys who would go on tour with bands like Led Zeppelin and Queen and David Bowie. And there's such rich photography that was all done on film back then. It's absolutely wild. And I will like directly lift a lot of things as a like very clear homage to that history that is embedded in reality. Yeah, there's like very like direct lifts, and then that's even something that I'm doing in referencing any scene that I come up to. I like to like sort of tap into cultural lexicon and like find like scenes from movies that have, you know, activated this like diner scene, or you know, picking up old design magazines and like interior design magazines, clothing, etc. Like the way that I can like dig in and like root this in something that is part fantasy and part history, I think is a little bit of a magic connection happening there. And yeah, this part was fun. There's like a portion of the book that's set in 1970s Vancouver. So I was digging into the Vancouver City archives. I was looking at work by some photographers who were active at the time and assembling this vision of what Granville Street used to look like when it was this, I mean, it's still a pretty gorgeous street, but it was just neon and electric and exciting. And even there's a portion where I was like figuring out where on Granville Island this like scene would be set, and like compiling old photography against like Google Street View images to like figure out like, okay, this bridge is here and this is that, to like lay in like some reality to anyone who's a resident of that city and is going to connect with that like skyline that used to exist. Yeah, this part here, layering Street View against references to films and all sorts of architecture that I could figure out would have been around in that era. Yeah, and I think that's, I think that the public art and the graphic novel are definitely my most like socially engaged works, particularly the graphic novel, in that it's a very vulnerable story. It's very personal. I write it with my co-author Ryan Denny Owen, and yeah, we've injected so much of ourselves into that, and it's been really amazing to see the way that that's connected with other people. On a multiple fronts, you know, through the aspect of the exploration of queer identity, through dementia, through depression, you know, in all of these regions, I've had really amazing conversations with people who have read the book. It almost acts as like a primer to like allow a person to have some of these difficult conversations. Yeah, and I'm excited to see it as it grows. We have intentions of making 3 more of these books, and I'll be at it for the next 8 years, so enjoy.
Wow, you're so good at articulating your process and your purpose, and your visuals were so awesome. I don't know how to describe them, but so great. And I really appreciate the thought that you put into the presentation and everything, and all of you were great at presenting, and thank you so much for sharing your art with us.